Imagine this. You're sitting on a plane, buckled in, ready for takeoff, when suddenly, a loud argument erupts just a few rows ahead of you. A flight attendant is standing in the aisle, her voice sharp and cutting, directing her frustration at a young black girl who couldn't be more than 16 years old. The girl, wide-eyed and visibly shaken, tries to explain herself, but the flight attendant isn't having it. "You need to move to your assigned seat right now, or I'll have you removed from this flight," she snaps, her tone dripping with authority. Passengers are staring, some whispering, others shaking their heads. But what no one knows, what the flight attendant definitely doesn't know, is that this isn't just any teenager. This is Mia Carter, and her father happens to own the entire airline. The tension in the cabin is palpable. Mia, dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans, looks like any other teenager traveling alone. She's soft-spoken, polite, and clearly not looking for trouble. But when she politely asks if she can stay in her seat, a window seat she'd been looking forward to, the flight attendant, a woman in her late 30s with a stern expression and a name tag that reads Linda, isn't budging. "Rules are rules," Linda says, her voice rising. "You don't get special treatment just because you want a better view." Mia's cheeks flush with embarrassment, but she doesn't back down. "I'm not asking for special treatment," she says, quietly. "I just thought—" But Linda cuts her off. "I don't care what you thought. Move." Now, as the argument escalates, passengers are torn. Some side with Linda, muttering about how kids these days don't respect authority. Others feel for Mia, sensing that something about this situation isn't right. A man in a business suit leans over to his wife and whispers, "She's just a kid, why is she being treated like this?" But no one intervenes. No one, that is, until a tall, well-dressed man in his late 40s stands up from his seat in first class. His presence commands attention, and as he walks toward the commotion, you can feel the energy in the cabin shift. He doesn't say a word. At first, just observes the scene with a calm but intense gaze. Linda, noticing him, pauses mid-sentence. "Sir, please return to your seat," she says, her tone slightly less harsh now. But the man doesn't move. Instead, he looks at Mia, then back at Linda, and says, "Is there a problem here? What happens next will leave you speechless. Because this man isn't just any passenger. He's Marcus Carter, Mia's father, and the CEO of the airline. The same airline Linda works for. The same airline that's currently embroiled in a public relations nightmare over allegations of racial bias and poor customer service. Marcus had been flying under the radar, keeping a low profile as he often does when traveling with his family. But now, faced with his daughter being publicly humiliated, he's done staying quiet. As he stands there, his expression unreadable, Linda's confidence begins to waver. She doesn't know who he is, not yet, but something about his demeanor tells her she's made a grave mistake. The cabin falls silent, every eye fixed on the unfolding drama. Marcus takes a step closer, his voice calm but firm. "I asked if there's a problem," he repeats, his gaze locked on Linda. She stammers, trying to explain herself, but the words don't come out right. Mia, still seated, looks up at her. "Father?" A mix of relief and apprehension in her eyes. She knows what's coming next, and so do we. But before Marcus can say another word, the captain's voice crackles over the intercom, announcing that the plane is preparing for takeoff. Linda, visibly flustered, mutters something about resolving this later, and hurries back to her station. Marcus gives Mia a reassuring nod before returning to his seat, but the tension in the air is far from resolved. As the plane taxis down the runway, passengers exchange uneasy glances. What just happened? Who is that man? And what's going to happen when this flight lands? One thing's for sure, this isn't over, not by a long shot. Because when the wheels touch down, Marcus Carter isn't just going to walk off this plane and forget about what happened. He's going to make sure everyone knows the truth about his daughter, about this airline, and about the kind of treatment no passenger should ever have to endure. But for now, as the plane ascends into the sky, the story hangs in the balance, leaving us all wondering what will happen next. As the plane levels off at cruising altitude, the cabin remains unusually quiet. The usual hum of conversation is replaced by an uneasy silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of a snack wrapper or the soft ding of the seatbelt sign. Mia sits by the window, her headphones on but her music paused. She stares out at the clouds, her mind racing. She's used to flying. Her father's job means she's been on more planes than most people her age, but this is the first time she's ever felt unwelcome in the air. She glances down the aisle toward first class where her father is seated. She knows he's probably already drafting an email or making a call to address what just happened. Marcus Carter isn't the type to let things slide, especially when it comes to his family. Meanwhile, Linda, the flight attendant, is in the galley trying to steady her hands as she pours a cup of coffee. Her heart is still pounding, though she can't quite put her finger on why. Sure, the man who intervened had an air of authority, but she's dealt with difficult passengers before. This feels different. She replays the scene in her mind, wondering if she overreacted. But no, she tells herself, rules are rules. The girl was in the wrong seat and it's her job to enforce the airline's policies. Still, the way the man looked at her, like he knew something she didn't, makes her uneasy. She takes a deep breath and decides to focus on her duties. After all, there are still hours left in the flight, and she can't afford to let this distract her. Back in first class, Marcus leans back in his seat, his laptop open but untouched. He's scrolling through his phone, his jaw clenched as he reads through the latest news about his airline. The headlines aren't good. Passengers accuse Skyline Airways of racial profiling, one reads. Customer service complaints soar. Amid staff shortages, says another. Marcus sighs, running a hand over his face. He spent the last 6 months trying to turn things around at Skyline, but it feels like every step forward is met with 2 steps back. He's implemented new training programs, hired diversity consultants, and even personally apologized to passengers who've had negative experiences. But incidents like the one that just happened with Mia make it clear that there's still a long way to go. Marcus glances toward the back of the plane where Mia is sitting. He feels a pang of guilt. He'd wanted this trip to be special, just the 2 of them, flying to New York for a weekend of father-daughter bonding. Mia had been looking forward to it for weeks. She's been struggling lately, adjusting to a new school and dealing with the pressures of being the CEO's daughter. Marcus had hoped this trip would give them a chance to reconnect, away from the chaos of their everyday lives. But now, thanks to Linda's outburst, the mood is ruined. He makes a mental note to talk to Mia as soon as they land, to make sure she's okay. But for now, he knows he needs to stay calm. Losing his temper won't help anyone. As the flight continues, the tension in the cabin begins to ease, but only slightly. Passengers return to their books, movies, and naps, though the earlier incident lingers in the back of their minds. A woman in her 50s, seated across the aisle from Mia, leans over and offers her a kind smile. "Are you okay, dear?" she asks, softly. Mia nods, forcing a small smile in return. "Yeah, I'm fine, thanks." The woman hesitates, then adds, "You didn't deserve that. She was way out of line." Mia shrugs, not sure how to respond. She's used to people treating her differently once they find out who her father is, but this time feels different. This time it's personal. In the galley, Linda is still on edge. She's trying to focus on serving drinks, but her mind keeps wandering back to the man in first class. There's something familiar about him, though she can't quite place it. She wonders if he's a frequent flyer, or maybe someone she's seen in the news, but before she can dwell on it too long, her co-worker, a younger flight attendant named Jake, approaches her. "Hey, are you okay?" he asks, his voice low. "You seem a little off." Linda forces a smile. "I'm fine. Just a rough start to the flight." Jake nods, though he doesn't look convinced. "Well, if you need anything, let me know," he says before heading back to his section. As the hours pass, the plane begins its descent into New York. The captain's voice comes over the intercom, announcing their arrival time and the weather on the ground. Passengers start to stir, packing up their belongings and adjusting their seats. Mia looks out the window as the city skyline comes into view, but her excitement is tempered by the events of the flight. She wonders what her father is going to do and what it will mean for Linda. Part of her feels bad for the flight attendant, After all, she was just doing her job. But another part of her can't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. Was it because she's black? Because she's young? Mia doesn't know, but she's determined to find out. When the plane finally touches down, the tension returns. Passengers begin to disembark, but Marcus stays seated, waiting for Mia to join him. As she makes her way up the aisle, she catches Linda's eye. The flight attendant looks away quickly, but not before Mia sees the flicker of uncertainty in her expression. Marcus stands, placing a hand on Mia's shoulder. "You okay?" he asks quietly. Mia nods, though her eyes tell a different story. "Let's go," Marcus says, his tone firm but gentle. As they step off the plane, Marcus pulls out his phone and sends a quick text. Within minutes, a black SUV pulls up to the curb and they climb inside. As the car pulls away from the airport, Marcus turns to Mia. "We need to talk about what happened back there," he says. Mia looks at him, her expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "What are you going to do?" she asks. Marcus hesitates, then says, "I'm not sure yet, but I promise you this isn't over." Mia nods, though she's not entirely sure what that means. All she knows is that her father doesn't make promises lightly, and when he says something isn't over, it usually means things are about to get a lot more complicated. Back at the airport, Linda is finishing up her duties, her mind still racing. As she heads to the crew lounge, she notices a group of her coworkers huddled around a TV. Curious, she walks over and sees a news anchor talking about Skyline Airways. The headline on the screen reads, "CEO Marcus Carter vows to address racial bias allegations." Linda's heart skips a beat as a photo of Marcus appears on the screen. It's the man from the flight, the man who stood up for Mia, the man who owns the airline. Linda feels the color drain from her face as the realization sinks in. She's in trouble, big trouble, and there's no telling what's going to happen next.